All right, thanks everybody for being here, and thank you, Dr. Marks, for being here. There's a lot going on, and I'm just going to jump right into it. What is going on over there? What do you see? How much damage is being done at the FDA from the current administration? And what do you think is going to happen?
So maybe I'll start on a positive note. So what is actually going right? I think, when you look at small molecule drugs, including siRNA, including monoclonals, other non-complex biologics, the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research is moving along. Stuff is getting through the process. Granted, because some review areas have been somewhat decimated, there have been missed goal dates, some delays and things, and I think because of the strain on the agency, we're starting to see, what I would consider time-saving rather than actually good ideas done, like trying to get rid of advisory committees. That's basically reduces the workload of review. But I think bottom line is, I think in the drug world, things are doing kind of okay. Not quite the same in the complex biologics world. It starts to get kind of murky in the gene therapy and cell therapy area, and then it gets frankly muddy when we get into vaccines. And just for those who care, devices are probably kind of a little bit like drugs. They're probably plugging along, and they'll probably do basically okay for the time being. But in the realm of complex biologics with cell and gene therapies, I think we've seen a number of complete response letters, products that did not make it across the finish line that were expected to. I think some of those were surprises. Industry doesn't like being surprised. That's not good. And what it's led to is some real challenges in understanding what the agency is looking for. And then I think what we see for vaccines is a uniform stance that has basically shown that the bar for vaccine approvals is going to get so high that I doubt we're going to see a lot of vaccine approvals for new entities in the United States, at least in the current climate. So I think that's what's going on in that part of the FDA. I'm not really qualified to speak at what's going on in tobacco or foods, but what we're seeing is essentially an agenda that's been put forth by the secretary as far as vaccines go, being prosecuted, and I think rather diligently. And I think this week we'll see kind of the non-FDA portion of that, the ACIP meeting, to see that prosecuted even further, which is, I think, which is why you're seeing some departures from various agencies, because there are some bright lines that those who believe in public health can't cross, and vaccines, which are, look, I think if you asked me, if you cornered me in a room and said, like, tell me two things, you have two things that made a big difference in public health over the past 2 centuries. So the first one I'd say is it was actually came from an experiment that we learned from in the United Kingdom in the mid-1800s. You probably should keep your drinking water separate from where you put your sewage, right? That's probably a good thing, right? That's number one. But number two is vaccines, which have saved, innumerable lives. And just the measles vaccine alone is estimated to save 1 million, that's not a mistake, 1 million lives of kids, mostly children under 5 years old per year around the world. So this is, to try to have this kind of vaccine denial become part of our culture is like taking us backwards. So that, to me, is of all the things that disturbs me the most, that does. I mean, there are some good things, right? Some good things that we can counter that with. Maybe the National Priority Review Voucher will be great. Maybe some of the new rare disease endpoint stuff will be great. But I think that's balanced with what's come along with it. which is some real baggage for public health and some uncertainty for cell and gene therapies.
So staying on the topic of vaccines, I wonder if this sort of thing is like a pendulum where it swings to one side and eventually comes back to the middle. Does it have further to swing towards the kind of the damaging end of it before it comes back to middle? Like how will this end?
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
How will it end, and what will be the time frame for it to swing back the other way?
And what will be the sequela?
So I think we're in, you can run, but you can't hide. And we all know what a bad flu season could look like. We know what bad COVID seasons could look like. Bad RSV seasons can look like. And by the way, there's something out there called H5N1, pandemic influenza. So there are multiple shots on goal to have something really bad happen across the United States. And unfortunately, if something else doesn't stop this before one of those things happen, sometime in the next year or two, whether it's this winter or next winter, there will be some combination of these. Because I can just tell you that from experience over the past decade as center director, there will be some combination of things, or some other untoward infectious disease will come to our shores, and there'll be an outcry. Mr. Vaccine Man, where are you? We need vaccines desperately. Please come to our rescue. Oh, Mr. mRNA Vaccine Man, please make us a vaccine quick. That will change the tack, but it may take people dying to actually have that happen. And that's really, to me, it's brutal to think about that that's where we have to go to, that we can't actually trust something we know, right? This is not, no one's ever been trying to say that vaccines are perfect, right? They, like any other medical product, there are serious adverse events that occur. But what we do know is that on the whole, the licensed vaccines in the United States save many, 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 many more lives than they take. And in fact, when we see vaccines that are associated with increased numbers of deaths, they get pulled from the market. Or, I mean, if you look, for instance, with the COVID vaccines, the Janssen vaccine that was originally authorized ended up being demoted to second line, and then it just essentially came off the market because people didn't want to take a 1 in a million risk of deaths from that. Understandably from a prophylactic, but to just throw out vaccination as a public health measure, I actually think that the bigger issue is we should be asking is how can we put ourselves at that kind of national security risk, that we put our population at harm's way of both natural and man-made threats, which are countered with vaccines. So I just think that's the bigger question to answer. Why would we ever want to do something that's that silly?
Mm-hmm. And so it's potentially could be a very dangerous time. What kind of safeguards have we lost, or do we need to consider bringing back, or new safeguards to put into place to try to mitigate some of this potential damage?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think probably there are two aspects to that. There's what we as public health professionals need to do, and there's what the government probably needs to do. As public health professionals, I think we fell down on the job in terms of communicating the importance of vaccination, the value of vaccination, what vaccines continue to do for us, even though we don't see them working, right? We don't see, when we have measles under control in the country, people just forget about the fact that the measles vaccine is actually what's doing it, and maybe we don't need the measles vaccine after all. So we didn't do the best job, and we didn't do the best job perhaps communicating about COVID. So we need to take a good look about how well we communicate as public health professionals. On the other hand, I think Congress is going to need to really look and think hard about who we have in these positions of responsibility for public health, because it's a pretty, significant thing that we're talking about, putting 341 million lives potentially at risk by getting rid of an accepted, saying that vaccines don't work or vaccines aren't something that we want to be using here because we know they work.
What about the scare tactics, though? We hear about these one-off data points, deaths and morbidity from vaccines. What do people make about that?
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave now because I'm going to have to walk to the airport because I'm too worried that I'm going to get in a car accident on the way there. Oh, oops, I may get hit by a car. I'm just going to have to stay here for the rest of my life here on stage, and you're going to have to be bored by me for the next God knows how long. Do you see what I'm saying? Life is the fact that any product that we make is going to potentially have an adverse event in someone. And determining whether those relationships are true or not takes a lot of care. And unfortunately, what I think we're going to witness later this week is people trying to have sleight of hand to show that things are related to vaccines that are not. But we'll see. We'll see what they present. What I'd like to say is, look, we understand vaccines can sometimes have adverse reactions. We know, for instance, for the mRNA COVID vaccines, when 2 doses were given 3 or 4 weeks apart, about 1 in 10,000 men between the ages of 12 and 30 got mild myocarditis. That was something we learned. It's something we wouldn't have found out had we not dosed tens of thousands of people with mRNA vaccines. But it's then something that we learned from, and we know you don't give 2 doses within 3 or 4 weeks of each other, and now we have a rate of myocarditis that's probably less than 1 in 100,000 doses of mRNA vaccines, and it's not even concentrated the same way. Again, mild myocarditis that we don't even know has any long-lasting effect versus certain deaths in particular populations, including younger people from infectious diseases, including COVID. And as much as people tried to say that, oh, COVID only, we hear this other narrative sometimes that only sick people died of COVID, right? Only people who had other comorbidities. But don't believe me, go to the data. At least fully 30% to 35% of the deaths were in people who were ostensibly healthy. Okay, well, maybe you could argue with me, oh, they had some other comorbid illness that wasn't diagnosed. But no, that's just not the case because some of these are from autopsy. You can basically understand that people who are healthy can die of infections.
Do you want to? You mentioned some events happening this week. Do you want to just outline for the listeners what those events are that you're thinking about?
So this week is kind of a busy week for public health. Tomorrow there'll be a Senate hearing of the HELP Committee, the Health, Education, Labor, Pensions Committee, where they'll be talking to the former CDC director and her deputy about what went on with the firings at CDC. And then later this week on Thursday and Friday, there will be a 2-day ACIP meeting. On the agenda for Thursday is a discussion of whether to do away with the birth dose of the hepatitis B vaccine, as well as what to do about the MMRV, that's the measles, mumps, rubella, and varicella vaccine, which is associated with a higher incidence of febrile seizures than the MMR vaccine, what will happen there. And then on Friday, there's a meeting to discuss some of their new findings on COVID vaccines. So it's a big week, and we'll see what happens here. And look, if there's truthful information put out there that's verifiable, I'd love to hear it. But having been up there with a front seat, I'm pretty sure we did not miss dozens of pediatric deaths because every death was investigated thoroughly.
Yeah. So worst case, when you're thinking about any of these vaccines that we're thinking about, a COVID vaccine or otherwise, is anything possibly going to get withdrawn? Or do you think worst case is we just change recommendations and possibly take data out of these internal databases, put it in the public domain, maybe out of context, raise vaccine skepticism, and those that are against vaccines will have accomplished the goals that way?
So thankfully, ACIP can't withdraw a vaccine. So I think we won't see vaccines withdrawn. I don't even think we'll get to a place where they'll absolutely say there's absolutely no recommendation. But they can do things that can really do damage, like say that there's, it's not indicated for a large portion of the population, or they could say that it's even taking something like the hepatitis B dose for newborns and say that it's going to be shared decision making. that, again, leaves this whole, what this is doing is it's driving up a cloud of dust about the value of vaccines. And to those who distrust government, who believe in conspiracy theory, it's going to once again decrease their willingness to get vaccinated. And that's a real problem because at the end of the day, I'm not someone who really likes the idea of mandates for vaccines. And that means we have to do our best to help people understand the benefits and risks that go along with vaccines. But having this cloud of dust around them, that's not going to be conducive to getting there.
So vaccines have definitely been in the spotlight, being targeted, but there are other therapies too that are being caught in the crossfire. Can you comment on that, especially since under your leadership you saw a lot of breakthrough therapies come to market, get developed and come to market, such as cell and gene therapies. So how is being caught in the crossfire, what's being caught in the crossfire, and how are the trajectories of those therapies being affected?
Yeah. So I think what's happened here is, whether it's an innocent bystander effect, unfortunately, you've got cell and gene therapies that are regulated by the same center that regulates vaccines. Cell and gene therapies really require, especially for small populations, a very advanced level of regulation. They need regulators who know about drug development. They need to be able to understand preclinical development, clinical development, how surveillance systems work, how manufacturing works, and they have to have a risk tolerance to understand that there's a risk benefit here, and that sometimes you take a little risk because the risk of not getting something to market means that you have a swath of people who have no alternative. That doesn't mean you can let unsafe therapies forward. They have to be safe. But it means that you accept a certain level of risk in the portfolio, so to speak. That is advanced. That is just advanced regulation. And you can talk about what's easy regulation. Easy regulation is when you look at something like Zolgensma, which is a gene therapy for SMA type 1, where you looked at the data from 15 patients, 14 of whom responded beautifully, who were alive when they should have been dead. Regulation could have been done by a sixth grader. Don't tell anyone that, because that's what they'll do. They'll hire a bunch of sixth graders at FDA. On the other hand, things that are much more complicated, some of the Duchenne's muscular dystrophy drugs, some of the drugs for very rare diseases, mucopolysaccharidoses, they have data that isn't clear-cut like that, that sometimes is showing that you're not actually making things better, but you're actually just stopping a curve of decline. That requires regulation 401, 601, whatever your upper-level graduate course is at your university. And that's what we're, I think, going to have real trouble with here, because I don't know that the expertise is still with the agency across the board, from upper echelons down through the ranks, to be able to really prosecute those products the same way as they were. And that's, I think, a shame.
You've had some proposals come out of the administration and the leadership of these health agencies that sound good in principle, but I'm wondering how realistic they are. So we've heard the incorporation of artificial intelligence as one effort, the use of things like real-world evidence, and then we have this other thing called the Commissioner's National Priority Voucher, where you could potentially get a drug approved in 1 or 2 months, which is remarkable because it normally would take 10 months or more.
And by the way, the other name for that is heroin for CEOs of companies. That commissioner's, let me start with the Commissioner's Priority Review Voucher. It sounds so great, this idea that you're going to have these really important drugs and you're going to be declared and you're going to get a 1 or 2 month review. I'm probably one of the only people at FDA that could tell you what it's like to do a review in 1 or 2 months, because as part of Operation Warp Speed, that's what we did for 2 of the COVID-19 vaccines. I nearly had to, I have a really big dog, and I had to keep him close by because people wanted to kill me because of what went on during that period, because you actually, to do these reviews and to do them with all due diligence as good FDA reviews requires thousands of man hours, person hours, woman hours, whatever you want to call them. And 10, 20,000 hours for a vaccine. That means in aggregate, to do this in a month, you're going to need 100 plus people to work on the file for that. And that's all they're going to be able to do for that 1 to 2 months. The agency, for instance, for our Center for Biologics, that would mean you would have to take basically half of the review division and have them working on this. Now, what does that mean? It means that everyone else's files in the area that's related to that is not going to get attention. So although it sounds great to have this, unless you staff up and have some way to make it happen, I don't see how you can do more than one of these a year without having mutiny. It's just the way it goes.
But that's with the assumption that they're actually looking carefully and doing real review and not just skimming.
Right.
Correct?
Well, there again, that's how things will catch up with you, because there are enough bad things that show up in drug files, even what are ostensibly otherwise good drug files, that if you're not careful to go through them, things will slip through. Anyone ever remember the name Francis Kelsey and a drug called thalidomide? You actually got to look because stuff can happen. And it's actually, I had tremendous respect for our first-line reviewers at the FDA, which I think is something that's been lost recently. These are people that devote their lives to public service. They spend hours looking through data and combing through it to find, either something that supports, but also a flaw that could be a fatal flaw. And to ignore that or to try to gloss over that is dangerous. And that's the same thing. Using AI, great to use AI if you know how to apply it appropriately to augment that process, but not to subvert the review process in which a human actually really thinks about, are there adverse effects of this? What is the real benefit risk calculation with this drug? So I think AI can potentially become an incredible tool for drug review. It's not there yet from the standpoint of what FDA can implement. So I don't think that's going to fix the 1 month to 2 month commissioner priority review voucher.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 5 products in the first round of this national priority review voucher that are going to go through. So it's not just one.
That's right.
Five.
No, I know, but that means just so you know, to do that for 5 products. Right. Again, if you want to do those reviews like they're normally done, that takes, normal review teams are 25 to 50 people that work on a product for anywhere from 4 to 6 months, depending on things. And yes, maybe not everyone is fully occupied all the time, but the idea that you're going to now collapse that down to a very short time it means you won't have advisory committees also, because you can't have them. And it will also mean that we'll probably be missing things that we would otherwise want to actually understand.
So now that my anxiety level is higher because of this whole discussion, in the last minute or two, what can we all do? What can everybody in this room do? What can we do to help?
So, I think we all have to just be realistic and keep on keeping on with drug development as best as we can. I think we need to support the trying to keep innovation moving forward the best we can, interacting with the agency as best we can. And I think we need to advocate for reforms in the current system that help us to bring confidence back into vaccines, that help us bring confidence back into therapies that actually are pretty important, like mRNA technologies, et cetera, that otherwise will go by the wayside, but potentially could save many lives. So I think we need to, there's an advocacy here, but it's also keep going about what you're doing. Don't abandon good drugs because the US is kind of out of style. There are actually plenty of other regulators out there globally. I'm not representing any foreign countries, but there are plenty of other regulators who are very happy to see your drug developed in their country because they actually still believe in mRNA technology and vaccines. On the other hand, we also need to advocate in this country to get to the right place because people should not have to die in order to prove that vaccines actually work. It's already happened. We know that. We know what happens, right? So it would be nice not to have to reinvent the wheel in that regard.
Dr. Marks, thank you so much for being here and for your comments.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for attending.